Step closer, if you dare. What if every spin pulls him deeper into a darkness he can no longer escape? In Chapter 2 of The Gambler, is Alexei risking his fortune or slowly sacrificing himself to the game? When I stepped into the gambling hall that night, a strange discomfort washed over me. I had already decided I would gamble, yet the thought of playing with someone else's money felt deeply unsettling. That uneasiness clung to me as I crossed the threshold of the casino. Everything, at first glance, felt unpleasant and hostile. I could never endure the cheapness of card games in foreign countries. How could I possibly tolerate the gambling of Russians, who praised the glitter of the Rhine casinos and dreamed of piles of gold coins covering the green felt tables? No one paid them for these fantasies inspired by some selfless devotion to the game. In truth, these halls were gloomy, stripped of brilliance and grandeur. And as for the gold coins, unless they fully covered the table, no one even noticed them. Sometimes, during the gambling season, a distinguished person, a wealthy Englishman, an Asian traveler, or even a Turk like the one seen that summer, would arrive to risk or win an enormous sum. But the ordinary gamblers played only with small, pitiful stakes. Large piles of money were rarely seen on the soft green velvet of the tables. When I walked into a gambling hall for the first time in my life, I hesitated. The crowd moved as a single mass, smothering my every motion. I felt alone, exposed, and for a moment I thought of turning back instead of playing. My heart pounded violently. For weeks, I had been certain that I would not leave Roulettenberg without some dramatic event unfolding. I felt, irrationally, instinctively, that something inevitable would strike my fate all at once. Ridiculous, perhaps, to place such faith in the blind chance of gambling. Yet I had always mocked those who called the hope of winning foolish or irrational. Why? I thought, should gambling be a worse way of acquiring money than trade or business? True, only 1 in 100 wins. But why should that matter to me? Still, I had resolved that on this first night I would merely observe, study, and make no moves. After all, a beginner's results are always meaningless accidents. And besides, I understood nothing of the mechanics of roulette, despite having read countless feverish descriptions of it. Everything appeared filthy and disgusting. The greedy, anxious faces packed tightly around the tables repulsed me. And yet, in my own desire to win money quickly, I saw nothing impure or shameful. I had always laughed at the moralists, the well-fed gentlemen with stable incomes, who preached that one must play small at roulette to avoid becoming a slave to vulgar greed. As if greed were somehow nobler when applied to commerce or property rather than the spinning of a wheel. Everything is relative. What a Rothschild considers petty and base may appear luxury and abundance to me. And truly, it is not only in roulette that people chase profit. Every human being, in every corner of life, strives to secure their future. Whether profit itself is dirty is a separate question, one I will not try to answer here. What mattered was this. By the time I entered the hall, the universal obsession with money and the hunger for gain had become familiar, almost natural, to me. In the casino, at least, there were no fake courtesies. You could act freely, openly, without fear or constraint. And really, what use is there in deluding oneself? Isn't self-deception the most pointless of all mental pursuits? What struck me most during those first minutes was the behavior of the gamblers. The politeness, the overly dignified manners that drew a sharp, precise line between what was considered acceptable for a gentleman and what belonged to the lower sort. There were, indeed, two kinds of gambling, one for gentlemen and one for the lower classes. It was a distinction so clear and so revoltingly snobbish that it was impossible not to see it. A gentleman would stake 5 or 10 louis, rarely more. If he were truly wealthy, perhaps 1,000 francs. He wagered out of pure interest, never out of desperation or real desire to win. If he succeeded, he smiled faintly, joked with a companion, and might even double his stake purely out of curiosity. But never, Absolutely never. Would he allow himself to be driven by the crude hunger for money that a gentleman must treat roulette as a mere pastime? He must assume, politely, that all gamblers around him are also wealthy men of breeding, even if they look as though they would kill for a single florin. Their poverty must be invisible to him. Their greed must not exist. I saw mothers bring their delicate daughters, sweet girls of 15 or 16, place a few gold coins in their hands, and explain the rules. The young girl would win or lose, flush with excitement, and walk away smiling as if returning from a harmless dance. Our general approached the table with strange self-assurance. A servant rushed to bring him a chair, but he paid no attention. Slowly, he drew 300 francs from his wallet, placed them on black, and won. He left the winnings there. Black came again. He won once more. The third spin brought red, and in a single instant he lost 1,200 francs. He smiled calmly and stepped away. I am certain that had his winnings doubled, he would not have remained so composed. Around us, I saw a Frenchman win 30,000 francs without the slightest change in expression, and then lose it all just as quietly. A true gentleman must never show emotion, not even if he loses everything he owns. Money must mean nothing to him. That is aristocracy. Yet another, even subtler snobbery existed. Some aristocrats enjoyed inspecting the common crowd with a kind of elegant curiosity, as if watching a grotesque circus stage for their amusement. They pretended to be above it all, and yet stared with intense interest. One must look, they believed, but not too long. Staring with persistence would be unworthy of a true gentleman. As for me, I was no gentleman, not in that sense. I belonged among the crowd, not as an observer, but as someone whose soul was already entangled in the fever of gambling. And if my own moral principles had begun to decay, I no longer cared. I was tired of measuring my actions against any moral standards. The lower classes gambled in a revolting, almost animalistic way. I was certain that petty thefts took place at the tables, dark little crimes committed by the croupiers themselves. Many were Frenchmen, perfect for such tasks. I learned quickly to watch for the subtle hand that would slide towards someone else's winnings, sparking sudden arguments and shouts. And good luck proving the stolen stake was yours. In the beginning, the mechanics of roulette felt like a foreign spell, an unreadable script. I only vaguely understood that players staked money on numbers, on even or odd, or on colors. I decided to risk only 100 florins from Paulina Alexandrovna's money. The thought of gambling with someone else's funds nearly paralyzed me. It was a miserable sensation, and I wanted to free myself from it as quickly as possible. I felt that by playing on Paulina's behalf, I would destroy my own luck. That I placed 5 gold Frederics, 50 florins, on even. Red came. I left the stake. Red again. I continued, and once more red appeared. Now I had 40 Frederics. I placed 20 on the middle dozens without understanding what would happen. It paid 3 to 1. My first 10 Frederics had grown to 80. And yet the unnatural tension, the sickening unease within me, made me want to leave immediately. Still, I placed all 80 on even. The ball landed on 4. I won again, 80 more. I gathered the full 160 Frederics and went to find Paulina. She was walking in the National Garden with the others. I couldn't speak with her until dinner. The Frenchman was absent, and the general, seeing the opportunity, scolded me severely for visiting the gambling hall. He warned that if I ever lost a large sum, his reputation would be ruined. Even if I won a large sum, he insisted, he would still be disgraced. As usual, he ended his lecture mid-sentence. That I answered him coldly. With the small money I possess, my losses will never be large enough to cause scandal. Later, on my way to my room, I finally met Paulina. I handed her the money I had won and told her I would no longer gamble for her. She stared at me in surprise. Why? She demanded. Because I want to gamble for myself, I said. Playing on your behalf paralyzes me. She mocked me, asking if I truly believed roulette was my only hope of salvation. With all the seriousness I could muster, I told her yes. My absolute confidence in my inevitable victory might seem ridiculous, but it was real, and I begged her to leave me alone. Still, Paulina insisted I share the day's winnings with her. She offered me 80 Frederics as my half of the stake and urged me to continue playing on a 50-50 basis. I refused. not because I disliked the arrangement, but because I was certain I would lose if I gambled with someone else's money. She left without listening to my protests that I, in the depths of my heart, I knew I would return to the tables, that I would gamble, and my fate, whatever it was, waited for me there.